Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Welcome back to the Hydration with Heart segment brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut, where we sip, reflect, and shine light on the stories that hydrate the human spirit. Today, we're joined by an extraordinary woman who is transforming how the world defines both beauty and belonging. Xian Horn is a joyful, half-Asian woman living with cerebral palsy, but that's not her story. Her story is how she used that diagnosis as a lens for compassion, creativity, and change. She's an advocate, a speaker, an educator, and founder of Give Beauty Wings, which is an organization that empowers young women and marginalized communities to embrace self-esteem and purpose. She's advised Microsoft, AT&T, the Whitney Museum, Parsons Open Style Lab, and even the United Nations, guiding global leaders towards more inclusive, accessible design. As we honor disability awareness and celebrate the unstoppable human spirit, Xian reminds us that resilience isn't just about overcoming limitations, it's about redefining them and turning adversity into access. This conversation on living joyfully with cerebral palsy is going to be about the power of inclusion and how community, compassion, and courage are reimagining what beauty and accessibility truly mean. We're going to dive in right now with advocate, speaker, educator, and founder of Give Beauty Wings, Xian Horn. Welcome to the show, superstar.
Thank you so much. What an intro. I'm so honored to be with you. And like I told you, it's just finding someone with an X in her name. Like we have to, obviously, we are family already.
That's right. Xian and Zen. Let's take it on. So let's talk about your diagnosis and the defiance, because that's what really captured my attention. So according to the CDC, nearly 1 in 4 adults in the US live with some form of disability, but representation, especially in leadership, remains deeply lacking. And you've said that living with cerebral palsy has been both your greatest challenge and your greatest teacher. So can you teach us and take us back to that moment of diagnosis or realization and share what that meant for your family, your identity, and ultimately your mission?
Yeah, if I can take you back a little bit, actually, I would not say that cerebral palsy is my greatest challenge. I was not, and this is part of my story, I was not told that I could not. I had parents who were artists who told me anything was possible, and I believed them. And so for me, I always say my life is better because I have a disability. Not easier, but better. And I think, yeah, so if I were to say that, it is the greatest blessing of my life because, first of all, I traverse the world with 2 shiny ski poles. So people tend to notice you and it starts conversations. And I think the greatest honor of my life is when someone comes to me and says, you know, I have a disability and this is what it is for me. Or my daughter has, you know, and people will share their stories, or they're going through a divorce or whatever it is. They feel more comfortable, I think, sometimes telling me this than some people in their own families. And I was diagnosed at a year old, so I don't remember it. But I think when I was considering that moment in my life, it was actually at age 9, walking through the lobby that had, where I grew up. And there was a floor to ceiling length mirror, and I'm 9 years old. And it's the first time I looked at myself and I saw my left knee go in. I really believed that I was just like everyone else. I just walked with ski poles too. And so when I saw that, I do look different. I was so shocked that I didn't know this. But I think that's really down to the bubble that my parents created for me as an only child. You know, I really, and again, as artists who we're all a little strange in my family in a good way. And I think that really helped to,
well, that's so powerful what you just said. The way you reframed what most people see as limitation into a source of wisdom is truly inspiring. It's what real empowerment looks like. And your parents, I don't believe they shielded you. I think they empowered you by allowing you to not look at your diagnosis as a limitation, which brings me into my next question, redefining beauty and representation. So as someone who partners with brands and institutions to build inclusive design, from Wonderman Thompson to the Cooper Hewitt and the Whitney. I mean, you're challenging beauty standards and cultural perceptions. So studies show that only 2% of models in mainstream campaigns represent visible disabilities, and that number hasn't changed much in any decade. So when you see beauty campaigns or museums that still exclude people with disabilities, how do you begin to shift that conversation toward real inclusion and representation?
In about 2018, I became a Forbes contributor. I wrote a piece about how fashion can be a barrier to employment. If you can only wear stretch pants and Skechers, you may not feel at your best in a job interview or in a professional setting, depending on what the job is. If you're in tech, maybe you can stretch it a little bit. But I wrote this piece, and I went to the community to get quotes from everybody, what they struggled with, whether it was shoes or blazers, what they couldn't get that they needed really for, to fly in a professional realm. And when someone from Allure read that, she came to me and said, "Is there anything about the beauty industry that you want to share?" And about 10 years before that, I actually pitched the Dove campaign, asking them to include people with disabilities in their advertising. I made a 2-minute video in my mother's living room. It was a minute and 23 seconds. They passed on it twice, but the video went semi-viral. Even I didn't realize how big and how vast the disability community was at that point. And so what happened, though, in writing this piece is I realized that not much had changed in 10 years. This was 2021. And I'm happy to report that in the 4 years since that piece has been written, it's like the beauty industry has just exploded with an awareness of disability now. And we have places like Rare Beauty, Selena Gomez's company, thinking about people with dexterity issues, Tilt Beauty, we have Guide Beauty, we have so many more brands in the last 4 years. And so the good news is that once the memo was received, it's just been an explosion and a very quick catch up. I just saw today Aaron Phillip, who actually went to my alma mater, lab school, is on the cover of Vogue right now.
There you go. It comes full circle. Now, the power of community and belonging is extremely important in every narrative, and you've built community not just through advocacy, but through shared joy, from your work with the Real Abilities Film Festival to advising Brooklyn Botanic Gardens and PBS Independent Lens. I mean, you're creating spaces where everyone can belong. And I love that. So why is community such a vital piece of the inclusion puzzle? And how can each of us in our own lives and workplaces cultivate that sense of belonging?
Well, that's a great question. I just want to back up to what you said about action for a second. Give Beauty Wings, the name of it is because it's all about putting our beauty and our gifts to action. So I loved what you just said. But also, to answer your question directly, as an only child living in my own bubble, I remember when I would hear the term disability community, I thought, what community? Because I was in a survival mode, was just trying to get through school, make friends, connect with people. And the wonderful thing is, since I've become an advocate and with internet, you can find community almost everywhere, no matter how rare your disability is. There's usually a group somewhere, and it's been so powerful to see people find each other. And I mean, obviously we can do nothing alone, really. And so when I became an advocate, it's like a whole world opened up. And I became more and more proud to be disabled because I just saw so many powerful disabled people doing so much. It's not just me. There's so many people that I could name that are doing this. And there is such solidarity in that. There's such power in that. And it's so much better when we can do things together. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
It so does, and it's beautiful because you make it sound simple, but it's really revolutionary, because belonging starts with intention and humility, both of which you are master at. Now let's chat about emotional sustainability in advocacy. Advocacy work can be both soul-filling and emotionally draining, right? You've spent years educating and consulting with global leaders, but you also radiate light, joy, and humor in everything you do. So what anchors you when the road gets tough? What anchors you when the work gets hard? How do you refill your cup? I mean, physically, emotionally, or spiritually,
Yeah.
when you give so much of yourself to others?
Well, I have to say that my faith, which I always believed in a God, but I thought you talk to God when you die and it's some kind of big wrap up of your life. And what I find is that God is always talking to us. And, and a lot of my, journey has been really just following those breadcrumbs that are placed in front of me. I don't know exactly where it's going, but I know it's going somewhere wonderful. And so, when things get tough, knowing that I'm not just doing this for myself, I'm doing this because there are people who are literally out there dying because they don't feel enough, because I know that there are people that need to hear the message that they're so beautiful or that they're welcome, or, you know what I'm saying? That, the greater purpose, the greater service of my life is the thing that keeps me going. And, if I don't do it, who will, right?
This segues into the world we're living in, because we're living in a world where Gen Z is more vocal than ever about inclusivity and identity and purpose. You said that. We came full circle in the last decade, right? But many still struggle to find their place. So what advice would you give to young people who may feel different or misunderstood, those who are still learning to see their difference as their superpower? What advice do you have to them?
I think my advice is allow yourself to grow and make mistakes. I think a lot of times, because we live in our own body, we're aware of the ways in which we're imperfect, to a greater degree. And it's almost like staring in the mirror too long. You start to see, the details, and we can overanalyze and put so much pressure on ourselves. And I think, let yourself be inspired by the people that are doing great things. I'm saying that because when I was younger, I was a fearless child, but as a teenager, going to college, for example, at 18, I went to a place where there were some 18-year-olds with 2 nonprofits already. And I thought, well, I can never be that or do that. And I was right. I'm not supposed to be Zen. I'm not supposed to be Megan. I'm supposed to be me. And, even having the incredible parents that I have, my mom worked with models. My dad was a model. They're so gorgeous and charming. And I thought, oh my gosh, they know who they are. They're so confident. They never went through a period where they didn't have friends or, and so I thought, oh my gosh, like how could I possibly, I came out of them, and how could I possibly live up to that? And what I've learned is that we all have our own beauty. We all have our own purpose. So you might be looking at someone else saying, oh, they've got it all together. Nobody has it fully all together, A. But also let that be something that motivates you to improve rather than something that makes you shrink. Because you have something, everybody has something specific to them that only they can contribute in the world. And if you don't keep going and figure out what that is, it's a disservice to the world.
You are, other than amazing, you are uniquely you. I love hearing you speak, and I love how in awe of your parents you are. But I will say to you that they are more in awe of you than they are of themselves and anything else, because you are the superpower. You are the superpower. And what you just said, I love it. Difference. Your difference, my difference, everybody's difference, that what makes us different, that's our superpower. And you've turned your own story into a living testament to that truth. So on this conversation on living joyfully with cerebral palsy, I would like to hear from you. What does living joyfully truly mean?
I think for me, joy is an extension of gratitude, and finding people and things that give you joy, and empower that joy every day. Joy doesn't mean that everything is perfect, and joy doesn't mean that there is no darkness. For me, I remember a long time ago, I coined a term called positivity activism. And what I meant by that is that life is hard, it is dark, but we have to choose to find the light where possible and be the light where possible. And I think for me, real positivity, real joy is acknowledging how difficult life can be while also celebrating how beautiful it is.
I want to be mindful of the time. This is the last question. So as we sip our Once Upon a Coconut today, a brand built on purity, vitality, and purpose, I have to ask, if hydration were a metaphor for life, what fills you up the most these days? What keeps your heart hydrated?
Well, like I said, I have a lot of love in my life, but I also think my faith is, because things can get very dark. And what I've learned is that we can be the light when we don't see it. And I think it's, but what helps me to know that I'm not alone, even if I am, let's say I don't, in the pandemic, we were isolated, in those moments that were so dark, it was really my faith that kept me spiritually hydrated and kept me going. And it was very healing time in a way to be forced to be with yourself, because I did a lot of reflection and introspection. So for me, I think that's probably the primary driver. And of course, all the wonderful people. I'm still friends with my first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade.
Of course you are. Of course you are. It's community. It's community. Right? Oh, well, we are officially out of time, but that was so poetic. I smiled throughout your whole answer. Listening to you is empowering. And that's exactly the kind of answer that refuels all of us. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming today. Xian, thank you for reminding us that beauty is so much more than what we see. It's what we share. Your courage and compassion are ripples that keep expanding outward. And I'm so honored to have interviewed you.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same. And I teared up when you were speaking. Thank you for, encouraging me. But also I wanted to say to the lovely audience, be a spectacle. Be a spectacle, be, perfectly imperfect, be who you are. Like, I honestly the thing that I learned most from my parents is that authenticity is better than perfection.
For those listening, you can learn more about Xian's incredible work at xianhorn.com and givebeautywings.org. And you can follow her journey directly on the gram at Xian for Beauty 83. That's spelled XIAN for Beauty 83. A huge thank you to our sponsor, Once Upon a Coconut, for fueling this amazing conversation, because when we hydrate the body, we awaken the heart. Until next time, stay hydrated, stay kind, and stay tuned to A Moment of Zen. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut.
Discover the refreshing taste of 100% pure coconut water that actually tastes great. Naturally sweet with no artificial flavors or added sugar. It's packed with electrolytes to keep you hydrated throughout your day. And with 10% of profits going to charity, every sip makes a difference. Pure taste, pure goodness. Experience nature's Gatorade. Visit Once Upon a Coconut or naturesgatorade.com.